Good evening. Thank you very much for being here with us. We're so happy. At first, we thought we were just going to have that group of troublemakers here, and now the whole room is full. And I'm so thankful because this gives us an opportunity through this workshop to lay some groundwork as we all together navigate through some of the issues that you'll be facing and that we're hoping to sort out in an ethical fashion through Chapter 38. Now, this room is booked till 9. We might go over maybe 10, so I hope you made preparations. We're going to be here probably 45 minutes. It's not going to take very long. Our presentation is not very long. It's very concise. If we went through the whole Chapter 38, this may take us a little bit of time, but we tried to curtail the information that we'll be providing tonight to what we believe you will be seeing and you'll be exposed to. At any rate, the full Chapter 38 has been tendered to you all, and you have already signed with blood, so we know that you received it and you're now subject to it. Now, again, bad joke again. You now have it, and we're hoping to keep questions to what we're going to be presenting here, which is what I believe you all be facing. But at the city attorney's office, you're always welcome. And as per Chapter 38, you can ask and make inquiries or ask for opinions that we'll be glad to provide. It may not be the right answer, but we'll give it a try, right? Now, in regards to this, the first part of the presentation is going to be handled by City Assistant Ms. Jennifer Hahn. Jennifer Avendaño, I apologize. She's the assistant that is apparently getting us into trouble with all of you. Just remember, if you just remember one thing tonight, I'm the good guy, and then she is the other one. Where's that picture go? Yes. Yeah. Well, she's the bad guy, right? And so, at any rate, with no further ado, here's Ms. Avendaño.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As the City Attorney Renee DeClaus said, my name is Jennifer Avendaño. He remembers me under my maiden name, Hahn. That's why he calls me that. Anyway, let's get started real quick. I'm going to be handling just the conflict of interest portion of Chapter 38, which I'm assuming most of you are not here to speak of or speak to, so I'm going to try to move through it real quickly. If you have any questions or any concerns, we just ask that you hold them to the end of the presentation and ask everything at the same time. So first off, what we handed out at the door were the paper copies of Chapter 38, and according to Chapter 38, we need to provide a copy to each of the board members, and in order for us to satisfy Chapter 38, we have to have it in writing that you did receive it, and that is why you received or had to fill out the acknowledgement form. So we thank you all for that. If you have not filled out the acknowledgement form and did receive a copy of Chapter 38, I would ask that you raise your hand so that one of the persons in the back that have the forms can go around and make sure that everybody fills that out. I also put on here that even if you have not received a copy of Chapter 38, it does not remove your responsibilities in regard to letting the city secretary's office know, letting your boards know of a conflict of interest that you may have, or of completing the financial disclosure statement. And the little last part right there where I have the website is, for those of you who are not familiar with what the Muni Code is, that is the website you can go to look up Chapter 38 if you're one of those individuals that would rather have it electronically. So the purpose of the Code of Ethics and the reason why the City of Brownsville and the commissioners and the mayor decided to make sure that it went active was for numerous reasons. Obviously, for transparency in government, that's huge, so that we know what's going on, and by we, I mean the people of Brownsville. They can understand everybody and the boards to what their actions are, what their intents are, and what their purpose is. So if you have to fill out a conflict of interest form, they know why you're refraining from that discussion because you have a conflict with whatever vendor, entity, person comes before your board. It also enables the public to evaluate the potential conflicts of interest, and that would reflect more to the financial disclosure statement in regard to stocks, bonds, properties, developments, investments, and things along those lines. and it deters corruption. That's quite obvious. I'm not going to get into that. And it increases the public confidence in government. If you put everything out there for someone to see, you're going to have less problems when it comes to, oh, well, we didn't know, we didn't see it. But if you have conflict of interest forms that are filled out, filed with the city secretary's office, the financial disclosure statements filed with the city secretary's office, each one of you will be safe from having someone come to you later and saying, well, they didn't disclose this, or they didn't that, or they didn't this. This is the purpose of having a code of ethics. And even more specific, in Chapter 38, Article 1, 38-1A, we put in a statement of purpose and what the principles of conduct are. So if you look at that chapter, and you each have the handout, so I'm not going to go through each one of those individually, but like I said, you need to make sure that there's transparency in government. You need to make sure that the public knows what it is you have outside interests, possibly in regard to someone who comes before your board. So the principles of conduct in regard to the way that we would go ahead and hope that each one of you is a member on your boards is to operate with integrity, make sure to uphold all the applicable laws, treat others with respect, be a responsible steward of the taxpayer resources, take no actions to benefit oneself, which basically means avoid every appearance of impropriety. If you think you have a conflict of interest but you're not sure, file the conflict of interest form. Don't take a chance. If you have a question in regard to whether or not you have a conflict of interest, call the city attorney's office, speak to your board member representative. Don't take the chance. And always consider the public perception and strive for growth. So basically what we're saying is, why are you guys here today? Well, Chapter 38 is specific in regard to all of the board members. So, an official and a city official include the following persons: members of all boards, commissions, committees, and other bodies created by the city commission pursuant to city ordinance or federal or state law, including bodies that are advisory in nature, which is a great majority of the persons here, and members of boards or entities appointed by the city commission that were not created by the city commission. So those would be sub-boards of the boards created by commission. So, a city official, which means a board member, as you just saw in the definition that we just gave, means that you cannot take any action that you know is likely to affect economic interest of the following: yourself, the city official, the official's outside client, the official's outside employer, a business entity in which the official knows he holds an economic interest, a business entity that the official knows is an affiliated business or partner of a business entity in which he holds an economic interest, a business entity that the official serves as an officer or director or in any other policy-making position. And finally, the last one is a person or business entity from whom within the past 12 months, the official, directly or indirectly, has solicited an offer of employment, received and not rejected an offer of employment, or accepted an offer of employment, or with whom the official directly or indirectly is engaged in negotiations pertaining to a business opportunity. And again, remember, when it says official, it means board members. So what's the definition of what it means to have an economic interest? An economic interest includes, but is not limited to, legal or equitable property interest in land, chattels, and intangibles and contractual rights, having more than de minimis value. So basically you have to have more than just a little bit. You have to have some actual value in regard for it to be an economic interest. Now there are a couple of exceptions to what it means to have an economic interest. So if service by the city official as an officer, director, advisor, or otherwise active participant in an educational, religious, charitable, fraternal, or civic organization, it does not create the city official having an economic interest in that property of the organization. Further, if a city official's primary source of employment is with a governmental entity, like the city of Brownsville, or, I mean, there's like Cameron County, so many different ones to choose from. Such employment by the governmental entity does not create for the city official an economic interest in the property or contracts of the governmental entity. So if you work, for instance, if you work for Cameron County and you're on a board, you technically do not have an economic interest in the property or contracts of Cameron County, even though you work for them. And then finally, ownership of an interest in a mutual or common investment fund that holds securities or other assets is not an economic interest in such securities or other assets unless the person in question participates in the management of the fund. So if you have these actual securities or funds, it's only a conflict of interest if you participate in managing it. Substantial economic interest effect. This one is in regard to family members. So a city official shall not take an official action that he or she knows is likely to affect the substantial economic interest of the following: the official's parent, child, spouse, or other family member within the first degree of consanguinity or affinity, the official's domestic partner, an outside employer of the official's parent, child, spouse, or other member within the first degree of consanguinity or affinity, or domestic partner, but only if the official knows the family member or domestic partner has a substantial interest in the outside employer. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with first degree consanguinity or affinity, that does mean marriage or blood, aunt, uncle, cousin, grandparent, all first line. And if you guys have any questions about that, we can send you a chart. A business entity that the official knows that a substantial interest is held by his parent, child, spouse, domestic partner, or other family member within the first degree of consanguinity or affinity. A business entity the official knows is an affiliated business or partner, or a business entity in which a substantial economic interest is held by his parent, child, spouse, domestic partner, or other family member within the first degree of consanguinity or affinity. Or, and this is the last one, a person or business entity from whom within the past 12 months the official's spouse or domestic partner, directly or indirectly, and it's the same thing as the economic interest all over again, but for the spouse or domestic partner, solicited an offer of employment, received and not rejected an offer of employment, accepted an offer of employment, or with whom the official spouse or domestic partner, directly or indirectly, is engaged in negotiations pertaining to a business opportunity. So what is a substantial economic interest? And it's a little bit different than an economic interest. So a substantial economic interest is when a person has a substantial economic interest in a business entity if the person owns 10% or more of the voting stock, shares, or other ownership interest in the business entity, or owns either 10% or more of $15,000 or more of the fair market value of the business entity, or funds received by the person, and the person they're referring to, remember, is your spouse, domestic partner, family member, from the business entity exceeds 10% of the person's gross income from the previous year. A person has a substantial economic interest in real property if the interest is an equitable or legal ownership with a fair market value of $2,500 or more, or ownership of an interest in a mutual or common investment fund that holds securities or other assets does not constitute direct or indirect ownership of such securities or other assets unless, again, like before, the person in question participates in the management of the fund. Now, here's the part that you guys need to be very familiar with, the recusal and disclosure. So if you know that you have a conflict of interest with someone that comes up on your agenda, this is what you need to do. A city official whose conduct or action on a matter would violate the improper economic benefit section or the substantial economic interest effect of this code must recuse himself. From the time that it is recognized, the city official shall immediately refrain from the further participation in the matter, including discussions with any person likely to consider the matter, and promptly file with the city secretary a written statement disclosing the conflict on a form provided by the city secretary, and promptly disclose the conflict to the board or commission in which the official is a member and shall not be present during any discussion or voting on the matter. This is a snapshot of what the conflict of disclosure statement will look like. There are a couple different versions of what this is, one for vendors, one for officials. There's an affidavit. You guys have questions in regard to which one? In regard to which one needs to be filled out, contact our office, contact the city secretary. We'll make sure to get you the right one. In regard to filing your financial disclosure report, this is where Mr. DeCoste was going to take over.
Thank you. Yes. All right. Well, I get the exotic part of the presentation, which is very, very short. But bottom line, in regards to the financial disclosure, there's some deadlines that everyone must keep in mind. For the most part, it's going to be in April, but just keep in mind generally what it is that we're discussing here today. Who is subject to Chapter 38, what your responsibilities for filing, who needs to file, and how to file. Generally, the filing would happen with the city secretaries. If you have any questions in regards to whether something is an item that requires a recusal because of conflict of interest, call us or file it. It never hurts to file and bring it up to your board. Now, in regards to, there's some in going back to the financial disclosure, I don't think, there we are, we're in the right page now. All right, number one thing is, the moment we file things, it becomes an open record. And I know this has been an item that has concerned a lot of you. And quite frankly, I think that many of the boards, just look around you, look at the membership on some of these boards. There's a wealth of history, of knowledge, of know-how, experiences that benefit all these boards and benefit ultimately the city of Brownsville and our citizens. We don't want to lose you guys, okay? I know we're going to have some questions in regards to this item, but I did want to touch up at this time that we need to comply with Chapter 38. However, we do have some sort of grace period right now because you all have voiced some concerns. We have listened. There's people from the city manager's office here who have also heard some of the concerns that you all have. Who wants their personal and financial items out there where someone could reach, right? I've been, the victim identity theft. This is not a fun thing, trust me. And I know that many people have concerns about having personal items out there. And when one sees the form that one needs to file in regards to the actual financial disclosure, at first, upon first blush, you look at 30 pages and you say, whoa, I don't really want to go through this. Once you actually travel through it, you'll see that it could end up being something like 5 or 6 pages, unless you're Trump and then you have 3 books worth of stuff, then, but I know that at the beginning it can be a little overwhelming, but as you navigate through it, you'll see that it's not as onerous as one may think. The city decided to move to a form that is promulgated by the Ethics Commission. That will change from time to time, but it really is not as intrusive as it seems. And definitely, I don't think it creates an excessive vulnerability to your items or to your information. Go through it, and you'll see that it's not as bad as it seems. But it is an open record, subject to information requests. We rarely see any requests for these. I mean, I think recently we had the first one in perhaps since we've been here, and I know those are not very common. And it doesn't deal with board members usually. It's usually about some of our elected officials mostly. But at any rate, you all voiced some concerns. We are about to go back to the commission regarding some of those. I know we've heard items such as, well, I'm just in an advisory board. I mean, what I do is not that important, or why should I be subject to this disclosure? Why should my information be out there? The city of Brownsville, I know management, and I know personally, we do value your input. And if it wasn't valuable, you wouldn't be sitting in one of those boards. And but we've heard that, if I'm not in a decision-making board or in a quasi-judicial board, why should I be subject to this? And these are concerns that we're actually going to present to the commission. I'm not sure it's going to be by the end of the month or perhaps the next month, but it's something that's going to be presented. So I know some people are kind of lurking around, without filing anything just yet. I think for right now, you're safe. But then again, we all need compliance. But I know there's a gray area right now until we have some final word from the commission as to which way we're going to go in regards to some of those concerns. And we move on to the next slide. Okay, April the 30th, by 5 o'clock. By the end of the month in April, you need to have this on file with the city secretary's office. You can email it, you can file it. We've seen all sorts of formats, but just get it on record, just to avoid any issues in this regard. And are you talking next year? Yes, usually financial reports deal with the year before, right? For example, many people are filing them late many people are really concerned and filed them for last year already. I think the deadlines have passed for everyone, but we're asking that everyone file one. And yes, this deals with everything from the last year, right? Not this year. And we were laughing at my office because I started dabbling in penny stocks, and they were making fun of my penny stocks, right? And I said, man, either I'm going to sell them right before I file my financial disclosure, or I'm going to really pump money into them so people, if anyone sees my financial disclosure and I got $3 in AT&T, they're going to have a quick laugh at that, right? But don't worry, if you acquired that this year, no big deal. It deals with the prior year. So I hope that answers your question. And let me just hold the rest of the questions while we finish. We're almost done, guys. We just got a couple more slides. The deadline information is there, and I think that goes with the information that everyone needs to file. I think we covered those in my last statement here. If you have any questions and you want to make that sure, call us. Give us a call. I mean, there's always someone there who'll be ready to answer these. We're there as per other aspects of Chapter 38. We're there to answer and give opinions. You can rely on our opinions. If we are wrong, you're still covered because you're actually doing what you're supposed to do. And if you have a concern, or inquiry, you ask the question, and it's a situation where everyone's on the up and up. We're hoping to give you the correct answer, but if you rely on to your detriment to an opinion that we give you, you are covered. Me, on the other hand, might be fired, the very next term, but you guys will be covered. So we're asking that everyone consider making inquiries and make use of the resource. We'll be there to answer all your questions, okay? And I guess if there are any questions, now's the time to do them. Yes, sir.
How often do you have to file these personal financial statements?
Every year.
Every year?
Yes, there is a short form provision for you guys. Elected officials do not, because you are going to be filing under the auspices of Chapter 38. Now, if you happen to be an elected official somehow, or an official that is listed under Chapter 145 of the Local Government Code, then you cannot do the short form, okay? You need to do the long form every year. That would be our commission, our mayor, myself, I believe the city manager. That covers only like 5 or 6 types of situations where we cannot do the short form. If you're not a public official or covered under 145, which that would be most of you, if not all of you, you can do the short form, okay? The short form basically says, and I think maybe it may be a slide that I jumped, basically it states that you make an initial filing, and as long as your information does not change, you can submit an affidavit stating just that. My financials have not changed, and you can do that for 5 years, okay? At some point, you're gonna have to do an original filing again. Yes, sir.
If I have a portfolio of 100 or 200 stocks,
You and I need to talk, because maybe I need to get some advice for my penny stocks here.
I don't buy that. But let's say, and if, it's always less than 10% or 5% of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do I have to just sign that I have a portfolio of so and so much? Or I would have to put in every stock and what the dividends,
No, I don't think it's that specific. I don't have the form with me. Do we have a form? It does ask to identify the stock, and there are some parameters. I think, let me see if I can get to that section.
I'm just gonna make it easy.
Okay, well,
I'll tell you, okay, I have Goldman Sachs portfolio.
mhm.
And I'll tell you, I have a portfolio Goldman Sachs. And if you wanna, I'll give you the name of the guy that's running it. And if you have any questions about it, you can call them. Would that be fine?
I think if, is this where it's at?
It explains.
Okay, there is a document that is promulgated by the Texas Ethics Commission that gives you the answer to your question. In the section, when you get this item, you get the actual form that you need to fill, along with instructions for filling it. To give you a short answer, there are certain parameters, because I don't know that you have to list every single stock, and I know some people maybe are in ETFs or other type of stocks where. Okay, great. Well, there are some parameters, and you don't have to designate how much per se, but there are certain parameters like less than, more than 5,000, less than 5,000, or no value. You don't have to tell everyone everything. There's just some general items. I mean, let's remember, what we want to make sure is that if somebody walks in front of your board, that you don't have the type and the amount of value in a stock that perhaps it would sway you in making a decision that is before you. And if it doesn't meet the criteria regarding what the economic interest would be, then you would not be conflicted to begin with, right?
I kind of read it, but this is the only way of doing that. They ask you how much dividends do they pay, how much, well, shares, that's no problem. The most of it is, if I have a portfolio of so and so much, what I can do, I have a portfolio with Goldman Sachs, this is my name, and so and so, this is the person that are taking care of it, and if you, I'll give you his name and telephone number, if you have a question about it.
Yeah, this is a form again that is promulgated by the Ethics Commission. I think it requires a little more information than that. However, let me revisit that with you perhaps on a personal basis so I can answer your questions and go over it. Would that suffice for purposes tonight? Would that suffice for purposes of tonight?
This is one of the main things, because most of what I own is the stock.
Right.
And the real estate is very easy, but everything I own is just stock. And I do not own more than 5% or 10% of the company, because
Let me double check your parameters. Let me see. I mean, at first blush, I would tell you that you have to identify and provide the information provided therein. I'm sorry? Well, don't leave just yet, because like I said, we're right now navigating under a gray area. We don't want to lose any of you, okay? Yes, we need to be in compliance with Chapter 38, but at least for right now, there's a little gray area while we're providing your feedback to the commission so they can make one final decision. We are fine-tuning certain aspects of 38, and we're hoping not to lose everyone, because there may be some further tailoring that may provide relief, okay? I'm not sure that the form would change, perhaps, because that is the one that the state follows, but I'll certainly be happy to look at it for you.
whenever you have a chance, you don't have to, you can call me up.
Is it a testing?
We'll do, sir. We'll do, sir. Yes, sir.
I was thinking, since we're all learning this, as well as you, that maybe if it would be like if there's a conflict of interest, then you fill it out.
Well, if you
No?
notice, we're trying to ensure that no one gets caught on an oversight or a situation where, I mean, we see it with the big commission. You know, when we're with the big commission, sometimes items pop in out of nowhere, and we see them that week, you know, and we try to catch them at any potential conflict, and we'll advise the commission in regards to a possible conflict, and we're identifying sometimes at the very last second, okay? This is going to be citywide, right? What we want to do is, there's a couple forms, and I think you had a picture of it right a few minutes ago. You have your disclosure from the public official side, and a disclosure from the person or the vendor side. One is a CIS, which is the one that the board members would use in describing conflicts that they see and they recognize. But then the vendor or the person before the board also has a responsibility to say, hey, he may not remember me, but he's my deal from God knows where. And so we're trying to make sure both sides have a responsibility for disclosure. But we don't want to catch anybody, but we want to make sure it's disclosed and avoid conflicts.
Believe me, and I'm sure that everyone in this room is ecstatic that we're doing this. You know, the ethics is so important, and I was very excited when I saw that we were doing this. I just thought we were going to get more into instances to help people know when things could go wrong. I was not expecting the disclosure, but I know you're working with us, and I'm sure that you know, it'll be something like, if you think there's a conflict of interest, do it, you know?
Well, this is a workshop, and we did provide the time to go over some questions. Now, who knows the parameter of situations that you'll encounter, right? And there are some items that you're going to see once every 10 years, every 2 years, who knows, right? We're navigating through this. This is a workshop, but it's one of a series of workshops. This is not the last one. This is just to make sure that we all get a good ground base from which to start, so that you know the resources that you have, so you can utilize our office as a resource to you all. We're still working with the city secretary's office in order to make this work. I'll get to you, ma'am, in just a second. But this is not exhaustive, and this is not the only resource you have. You can always call us. We're attorneys for the city, but we also provide legal services to all the boards.
I appreciate you all doing this, and in my business, I have to take maybe 4 classes every year in regards to ethics.
Well, we'll be happy
Yeah.
to help whenever, okay?
Question?
Yeah, ma'am, back there? Okay, I heard two. Okay, first and second. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I am a member of the board of directors for the credit union.
Okay.
And this board, the members in this board are not created or elected by the city commission. They're elected by the members of the credit union. So we're not appointed by the commission or created by the commission.
Very good That is a very good question. That is one of the first questions I encountered when I got the appointment for this job, because You walk like a city department, you talk like a city department, you act like a city department, you respond to other city departments, but you're owned by your stockholders, and you have your own board, and you're correct. That is one of the first questions that I asked. I didn't see how the city could be in the banking business, because in a way, that's what it is. And I understand it's a misconception, but you do provide a lot of financial services, right, for the employees. So that is an item that we have brought up. The documents that created you are, they have not been looked at in years. And we are looking at that because we had a question about a possible conflict between your department and one of the commissioners, okay? We opted to go safely and say, look, this is very closely, it is not a city department, but it's so closely associated to the city that in order to avoid the look of impropriety, we ask the commissioner to take certain measures, right? So yes, your board may not be subject to this at the end of the road, and we'll be happy to look at that for you, but it's not clear cut how you all were created and how you're all still working within a framework that is normally reserved for other city departments, okay? And I know, and I hope that answers your question for now, because that's all we got. We're still looking at that because of those other issues that came up, but it is an item. This is going to be some homework for city management, because there might be some issues there, okay?
I worked for the city for 34 years, and I came in a year after the credit union was created. And it was created, the city is a sponsor
Right.
for the credit union. They give us the office, whatever, and pay 1/3 of
Well,
that salary.
you know, I try to be just like anybody would be out of the city of Brownsville. I called your office and I said, hi, I'm Joe, whatever. Are you a city department? And the person on the phone said yes. And, so I go, wow, it smells like a cat, it meows like a cat. And everywhere I looked, it didn't match the paperwork that I was seeing. So that's something that we're certainly going to be looking into, okay? Ma'am, back there? I don't believe it just needs to be acknowledged by you. I don't recall. Does it? I don't. Well, pay attention to that. I did mine electronically, and the one that I submitted was not required to be notarized. But I'll double check that for you. You have the form. Go by that.
Let's say I fill this out, and I don't think that there's a conflict here, and what my interpretation is of conflict.
Okay.
So then I sit on this board, and is somebody going to check that Rose Timmer has a conflict with what's coming up before that, or you just leave it to us?
Well, I mean, we're not going to micromanage anybody. But let me just, well, that doesn't mean you walk away and not file anything, okay? Because what happens is, it is not an issue until it becomes an issue. And then when it becomes an issue and we start looking at it and, bottom line, we don't have issues with any of the boards. But when that one problem does arise and it happens to be you the one involved, it's just not good. It's not good for the city, it's not good for transparency. We can't tell, we're not going to be micromanaging everything you do, we're not. But there are some valves and checks and balances, and if an issue does arise, and people that do not conform with this, I mean, if you decide to serve, we need to, go by and act according and under the auspices of Chapter 38. We need to do what our responsibilities are, because things do happen, trust me. My office is there because we have a lot of issues everywhere, so please comply. I want to make sure that that's clear. Sir? Right. It's an item that is just going to stay there, and if anyone has a disclosure, Ms. Avendaño will answer that. She's in charge of disclosure. So.
Actually, it'll stay in effect for 2 years after the fact of you resigning, no longer being a board member, but it's at your request. You have to file something with the city secretary's office saying after those 2 years, after you are no longer on the board, that you want it removed from public disclosure. So let's say today was your last day on your board. 2 years from today, you'd be able to file something with the city secretary's office to ask to have it basically torn up, shredded, removed, and it would no longer be available for public information. Well, if they submit a public information request, they would be able to have access to that, correct?
I mean, they don't access a website and all your stuff is there. Someone would actually need to file. I mean, you'll know who's accessing the information. They need to make a formal request in writing, and that will be reviewed by our office to see if it should be disclosed or not. So it's not just somewhere where everyone can see it. No, you need to follow certain procedures to get access, but it's out there.
And actually, if someone does make a request for your personal financial statement, a form goes into your file saying who was requesting that information. I don't believe so. I don't believe so. But I can double check.
And we do keep records of what the requests that come in and the responses that come out. Yes, sir.
I own no stock, no bonds, no mutual funds. The only property I have is sitting under my house. So in these 30 pages, is there any place that it asks for numbers of what kind of salary I make?
I don't recall the salary. I don't think that's an issue. It's not an amount. Right. That's where your salary comes from. Right. So your form is going to be looking probably like mine was, you know, just a couple of dots here and there and you're done. I mean, it's just a couple of pages, right? So don't be disheartened when you see these 30 pages. If you do the PDF format, as you're answering, it starts taking away the information you don't need to provide, and eventually you end up with your actual submission, which would be much, much less than 30 pages.
And I did fail to mention during the presentation that if you guys do want the fillable PDF form, please let the staff member for your board know and we can email it to you. And then that way you don't have to worry about filling out the paper copy and you can do it on your computer. And it's much easier on the computer, like Renee said, you can just check it off and then it disappears when you go further on down.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just to be extra clear, we only need to fill out those forms. So the personal financial statement or the other form over there declaring a conflict of interest, if we do have a conflict of interest.
Correct.
The financial disclosure statement does need to be filled out by everyone in this room that is a board member. That is
okay.
100%, everybody needs to file that. The only thing that you do not file is the conflict of interest form. You only file that if, when you see your next agenda, you see an item and you're like, oh, I think I have a conflict. That's when you fill out the conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you. I thought the opposite. So this we must fill out.
The financial disclosure statement, yes, you must fill out.
And we have until June 15 this year?
June 5th of this year.
Well, this is very, I'm good at filling out forms. I'm really good. But this is going to take me at least 10 hours.
I thought it would.
Minimum.
It takes like 15 to 20 minutes. I mean, unless you have tons of stuff everywhere, right? Again, the Trump situation. But believe it or not, most people take 15 to 20 minutes tops. I mean, unless your assets are so extensive that you're filling every page in there, normally, and I'm saying a normal person would take a few minutes. What I'm saying, don't be scared by the form. A lot of these forms are going to not apply to you as you're going down the road.
We need to fill this out if we were a member of a city board in 2018.
No, you're going to be filling this because you're a board member with us now.
Okay.
Right? But if what you're asking, it's only your information because you're here, and it's going to be because of last year's activities, right? The information there is very self-explanatory. If you have any questions, call our office. We'll be happy to answer that. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Since you mentioned earlier there's some troublemakers in here. What is the
And you're almost there.
penalty for non-compliance, and what is the city's measure after
There's what they want to know is what are the penalties for doing or not doing this or doing this wrong. If you notice in chapter 38, there's a whole array of penalties or admonishments, because they're not really penalties. If they know that your mistake was just a mistake that everyone would have made, that it was not because you meant to, in fact, give the wrong information, you may receive an admonishment, you may receive a letter. I mean, it's right there in chapter 38. There's a whole process of what you could get. But let me be real frank. The penalties in the chapter 38 are civil in nature, and they're basically admonishments to perhaps getting you kicked off the board. But certain mistakes are not mistakes under the eyes of the law, and they could be considered tampering with governmental records. And depending on the level of the tampering, it's a felony, and that could be an issue. I mean, there's some people that are gonna lie for sure, and that could give it, that could make the level rise from just a civil penalty or a letter of admonishment or you getting kicked off the board. If you purposely lie and you break the rules of how you're to fill these forms, then it could become a tampering with governmental record situation. It could be a felony. Yes, ma'am. No, I think June
5th for the
June the 5th.
financial disclosure statement form.
Yes, hi, long time no see. I know, right? Can you believe it? I'm sorry? You can probably, you're supposed to file it with the city secretary down at City Hall. But I'm not sure if they're gonna allow you to do it by email. I don't see why not, but
And we did put the city secretary's email address up there online, so you could go ahead and file it that way as well if you needed to. Send it to your board member if you feel comfortable enough with your board member to, have access to your financial disclosure statement form, and they could file it on your behalf for the city secretary. Or if you want to send it to our office, we could do that as well. Only if you feel comfortable with us. It doesn't need to be seen by anybody else other than being taken to the city secretary's office to say it's on file. Yes, there is this form that we printed. It is a fillable PDF form. So if your email address is provided to a staff member, your board staff member, then they can go ahead and send you the fillable form. And you can fill it out that way on your computer and then just submit it online as well. And we'll double check on the notary. I believe it has to be notarized, but I'm not 100% sure.
It's already 6:30, 7 o'clock, what do I know? I don't recall. I know there were some forms that I filled out that were done online, and I'm thinking probably back to the days when I was a judge, but in thinking about this one, it may have been notarized, but just double check. The form is very, very simple, and it has proper instructions, and if you have any questions, you can call us. Yes, sir. It all depends.
You can take it to the city secretary's office, and the city secretary's office can notarize it for
Or
you.
the city attorney's office. We have two notaries.
Even if it's something that the city
If not, walk to the second floor of City Hall, right outside the door of Chambers, and we have two notaries standby. City Attorney's Office is going to be for free, for sure. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
I serve on a small board, and I'm sure everybody here that also serves on boards or commissions firmly believes that their respective board or commission is very important to the city. I'm concerned about the one I serve on that is responsible for historic preservation in the city of Brownsville. It's a board of 7 members. And I'm afraid that there's going to be several members that are not interested in filling out this form and will probably resign.
Well,
And that'd be a loss to the city because of the extensive experience that each of these members have. And I worry about that.
we had heard something similar, not only from that board, but a couple other boards. And if you recall, when I started this, I said, look, we appreciate the wealth of experience and everything you all provide for these boards. And every board is important, and we agree with you. And this should not be we shouldn't lose members because of this. But bottom line, there are certain boards where the law requires it, okay? There are certain boards that it doesn't require it. The bigger boards or quasi-judicial boards, it is a requirement. So there's not much we're going to be able to do about those. But some of the advisory boards, we might be able to provide some relief once we present it to management, and management presents it to the city commission. And we should be getting something done within the next couple of meetings. Okay? That. Oh, we're going to permeate this information to the departments, and they should be able to let their boards know, okay? Just bear with us. There's just gonna be a little gray area for now to provide some relief, and hopefully we don't lose, anyone. Yes, sir?
Will those meetings happen before June 5th?
Well, right now, I know there's some items right before the elections, and it might be tough. Ms. Walker, would you like to address that? Ms. Walker is zoned out, so. Okay. I know that it's something that we heard, and we don't want to keep you guys in limbo, not filing these. So we're trying to move as fast as we can, and we're still gathering information, and eventually it's going to be presented for direction to the city commission. Okay? Yes, sir.
In my case, I'm up for
Appointment?
sometime in June. If I file a form on June 5th, and then I don't make the appointment.
No, I mean, we're going to try to get, I know we have, Ms. Walker, we're going to have 1 or 2 meetings left before the final elections. Do you know how many more meetings we got? Yes. 2 more meetings. Okay, we have 2 more meetings. I'll try to make sure that we have some sort of a decision by management, and I'm going to see if they won't or they can't. I'll put it on there and present it to the commission so that we can get this to you all as prompt as we can. I'm sorry?
Our board has 5 members in this situation.
Okay. I'm going to try to get that done for the very next meeting, not the one thereafter, okay? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Good question. Ms. Avendaño, would you like to stab at this?
In regard to ex officio and in regard to alternates, that was not specifically addressed in Chapter 38. That is going to be something we're going to have to look into for the next draft of Chapter 38 for any amendments. So if you are an alternate or an ex officio of a board, at this time, it does not look as if you technically have to file it because it says a member of a board. It doesn't specifically say an alternate. But the problem with that becomes not in regard to the ex officios, but in regard to the alternates. Those, for the most part, are appointed by commission. So,
And they get to sit at some point.
Yes,
So
they
if
do,
I
so-
think an argument can be made either way. I'm not as daring as Ms. Avendaño. I would say file.
I would
because-
file.
Because you would need to sit and make decisions, and that's exactly what we're trying to make sure that we have is people that can serve without any conflicts, right?
But an ex officio doesn't do voting, so I would assume that in that case, because it's not specifically addressed in regard to an ex officio, and those sometimes are not appointed by the commission, those are by statute or by some type of ordinance, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little confused because you said that everyone in this room has to fill in the application, but then you said that committees are not going to be,
No,
advisory committees.
No. It covers, right now, it covers everyone. What we've heard is, we've heard some feedback that perhaps some of the advisory commission, committees, they're asking perhaps some relief from having to file the personal financial statement. 38 doesn't make a difference, and it's already been enacted, so you're supposed to file. What I did say is, right now, we're proceeding under a little gray area where we're trying to get an answer to certain boards in regards to certain issues. So what I'm trying to say is, you probably won't get into trouble until we can have a definite answer in the next couple of weeks. If you don't have any issues, then you should file, okay? All right.
I have more of a clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Not just a question. And maybe I missed it, but I think I read it a few times. According to the state of Texas, where it says who has to file, we as an advisory board is not listed anywhere in here. Now, I want to know why, as a city of Brownsville, you're wanting us to fill this personal financial statement out.
Okay, Brownsville is a home rule city, which basically says that Brownsville can make any rules, right? As long as they're proper rules. So some cities like Brownsville that are home rule based have a code of ordinances, they have their city charter, and we basically rule ourselves in an autonomous way from any other entity. Now, there are some cities that are not home rule cities, they're smaller cities. If you can just think of the small cities you run through between here and San Antonio, there are some that are so small, they don't have the requirements of the provisions that allow them to become a home rule city. So what happens to those, some of them don't even have a charter, don't even have ordinances, so they go by the local government code, okay? And that's what you're referring to. The local government code gives parameters to those cities that don't have, or are not home rule cities, that don't have their own charters or ordinances. Now,
Override the state of Texas.
in certain items only. There are certain items that are specifically designated for the state to be able to dictate what the law will be in certain instances, right? But in this regard, the city of Brownsville can be a little more demanding than perhaps what the local government code provides. And remember, when I said in certain aspects, the local government code is less onerous in Brownsville. But in regards to certain aspects, like for example, I can't do a short form. The local government code says I need to file every year for sure. You guys are going to have the ability to do short forms. If nothing changes, you just submit an affidavit saying, and you're going to be good because the local government code will not pertain to you. Now, this was an item that some thought went into this, and there was some discussion with the commission in this regard. We didn't just willy-nilly decide to do this. We looked to see what our sister cities were doing. We looked into what San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and all those other cities were doing. Many of the cities are much worse than we are. I don't know what they've seen that had caused them to ask for so much disclosure, but we just did not decide on our own to just put it there. We brought ideas from other cities because we took Chapter 38, the expired version. We tried to see what to change and what not to change, and we provided information from what other cities are doing in this regard.
I don't have a problem in filling this out. We as volunteers, we do it. Now, all the employees are going to have to do it as well?
No, not the employees.
Really?
Not all the employees. I'm sorry. Well, certain employees will be. For
No,
example,
I know that, but still, you're still an entity. You're still working for the city of Brownsville. And in our past, knowing this town, some situations happen as an employee.
well,
and
they're
not
still.
just as a
Let's not
volunteer.
confuse the item here. They're still subject to Chapter 38. Okay. However, they're not in roles or positions of authority or decision making. They do their jobs, and they have a city manager or another director that dictate what they do on an everyday basis. You guys are in a situation where you are basically the head of the entity, and you make decisions, and that's the difference. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Real quick question. Is this subject to the approval of the city commission, or is this just up to you all?
No. The city attorney's office, we work for the city of Brownsville. We provide legal opinions and advice to the commission and to the various departments within the city, right? All we do is we're going to bring forward to the commission your concerns, and we're going to say, look, this is the feedback we're getting from Chapter 38, and these are what we're hearing. This is the relief that they're requesting. These are the reasons why they're requesting it. They'll decide, you know what, look to see if we can ameliorate the effects of 38 for some of these boards, and we will. Again, some boards will not be getting any relief because they're quasi-judicial or decision-making boards, right? And by state rule, they need to disclose. Okay. Any other questions?
Me as a staff member of City of Brownsville, I think I see it on the
Right.
Council of Government. And then the city of Brownsville has been working, the city commission has been working to reorganize and be more clear as to who can serve in what position and what capacity. And then since we are a small city, sometimes, yes, we're eager to serve, but then we might have some conflict that might look bad on paper. Maybe it's not that.
Well, you got it even worse than the board members do, because you guys don't only have to comply with Chapter 38, but you also have your employee manual that you need to go by, and that's fairly restrictive. So,
But what I mean is, I'm just voicing this.
yeah, they don't get off easy. Trust me. They have an employment manual that they need to comply. That is much worse than what we're doing here, right? Okay. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you all for coming again. If you have any questions, feel free to use us as a resource for you all. Okay. Have a good evening.